Hey everyone, this is Piranha06 coming to you from my downtown condo man cave, and this is the next video of updates that I've done since the last one, and I've got a big long list of things that I've done since the last video, so let me show you. So there were two main drivers for this list of updates. Most of the updates were because of these two things, a few were not. But the first one is I wanted to get back into general aviation flight sim, so Microsoft Flight Simulator is the choice for that. I've had most of the versions that have come out with that, but I had been putting off Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 because there were a lot of bugs and things that I heard about when it first came out. And so I just wanted to give it plenty of time to get all that settled. And so I finally got it. In the meantime, I got into DCS, which is the military. I think one of the best military sim for flying is out there. And so I just kept putting it off, but I've got the bug again for it, and so I wanted to get that, so I did. So that precipitated some things that I've always wanted, even when I had Flight Simulator before. And so the first thing on the list, as you can see, is a flight yoke on that second level. Also, because of the flight yoke, there's another wheel deck. So I have two wheel decks in place. This is from SimLab, I believe. I was ordering a couple of other things from them, so I just got it from there. And this is the Honeycomb Alpha yoke, and I did a lot of reviews on yokes, and I was going to get just like the cheapest thing out there, just to have something that was like a yoke. But you know, it wasn't a lot more for, you know, the top of the line, the one that most everyone recommended. So this has a weird mounting system I just wanted to show you. It's got kind of a, imagine like a wall picture hanger that has the big opening and then it goes to a smaller opening. So that's the way. I don't have it totally screwed down right now to show you this. But so there's like this ball and socket thing. So there's a ball thing here, and then on the bottom, it's like the, yeah, like a big opening that goes to a small opening. So you put it down and then you slide it back, and then you use these corner screws to screw down the corners that lock it into place on this mat that you have to mount. Now, this getting everything to fit, obviously I have a direct drive wheel, and I had another MFD that was here. I had to do a lot of rearranging to get things to fit. I even had to cut this. So it is never going to be usable as out of the box, but hopefully if I ever wanted to sell it, I could order a new plate to sell along with it if I ever got to that point. Probably won't, but just in case. But I did cut it. It's just plastic. It was easy to cut. Drilled holes where I needed them to mount it onto the wheel deck. And so yeah, that worked out pretty well. The next two things you can see over here on the right, I guess so the light is not a glare, is just the Logitech throttle quadrant that just gives you the mixture, the propeller, and the fuel for most small general aviation aircraft. You could map it to multiple for larger airplanes. I'm not into larger aircraft yet. I just do like to do the smaller stuff for now. So that's a nice little added for realism. So that just like in the real world, you have one hand on the yoke, one hand on your throttle. I know it's not called the throttle on a plane. I forget what it's called, but anyway. And then the other one that you can almost not see is I bought a trim wheel. This has been, I love it when it works, which is 99% of the time. Usually when you first get in the aircraft and you first use it, it like jumps. It's almost like it remembers where it was last, or it automatically jumps full up or down. So you have to kind of play with it before you take off, so that if you get in the air and you haven't touched it yet and you start moving it, it'll nosedive or go straight up because it just goes to a maximum. And I haven't figured out a way around that, and I've seen some other videos and articles about it online, and they say the same thing, that it kind of has this memory of an extreme for some reason. And so you just have to work around it. But once you're in the air flying and it's working, it is great. It's much better than using buttons to go up and down incrementally, because you don't get a feel for, I don't know, how much, because you can't see how much it's moving when you're pushing a button or how fast it's moving. And a lot of times it doesn't give you the sense that it's doing anything. So Anyway, that's the things for the flight sim for Microsoft Flight Simulator stuff. As you can tell, because of the additional wheel deck now, I had to move my fan, and I moved the foot cam down below the second deck level again. So had to rearrange a lot of stuff to get all this to work. But that's part of it, and I enjoy. That's part of the hobby as well. And I had to raise the upper wheel deck some, just so that my legs will still fit in to be able to use the pedals for driving. I know it doesn't look like there's clearance enough, but it was even lower, and so it was working, but it was still barely touching, and it wouldn't work for anybody except me. So I had some room to raise the wheel deck for the wheelbase, and so I did that to make room. What else? Oh, and that's the trim wheel is the Flight Velocity Trim Wheel Pro. So, another problem that Microsoft Flight Simulator caused, though, it didn't cause it, it just exposed a limit to my system, was that after about a 25-minute flight, it would just crash. Totally, I mean, not even just blue screen of death or back to the desktop, my entire PC would reboot. And so after doing an extensive search about possible causes, of course it could be anything, but I found a guy who solved his problem. He was having the exact same problem I was. He solved it. I went on to Microsoft Flight Simulator's Discord service and asked someone there, and they said the same thing. And it was just that simply I needed to upgrade my power supply. So I found this hard to believe because I had an 850 power supply, 850 watt, and my entire system shouldn't require more than about 600 watts. So I found it hard to believe that with 200 watts of headroom or more, that I was having a power supply issue. But I thought, I'll buy it, I'll switch it out, and if that isn't it, I'll just return it and keep looking for the problem. Well, I traded it out and that worked. So I bought a 1,000 watt power supply, put that in there, and I flew for like almost an hour and a half the other night and had no problems. So just strange that was the solution to the problem, but it is an upgrade that's on the list that you can't see. And that's the only thing I've done to the PC itself, the desktop box there, the gaming box. So no other PC upgrades. One other, so Flight Simulator related. Let me get this out of the way so I can get to the rest of the stuff over here. But I've still got the wheel on, so I'm going to take this off. And you'll see a little bit of how I switch over things. Sorry. I had the number pad, as you'll remember, as a UFC. So I liked that idea, and if you remember from my last video, I had bought that. Sorry for where the camera's just. I'm reaching over with one hand to try to grab something that I should have had ready beforehand. Okay, here we go. Sorry. So I bought a mechanical keyboard that is programmable. It has all the buttons that I wanted that the number pad didn't. You can even program the LED lights behind it, all that. So that's my new UFC control pad for the Hornet when I'm flying in DCS, or it could be for any upfront controls for any military plane. Sorry for keep putting my hand in the way there. I'm a one-man show here, so sorry, you have to bear with what I'm capable of doing with one hand. So that's it. That was not a big upgrade, but flight related and new hardware, so just wanted to highlight that there. Another thing over here is we already had this, I didn't buy it new, but it's like a console organizer. We had bought it to try to think about putting it in our living room to hold remotes and things, but it was just too big and bulky. But it was cheap and I hung on to it. And so now I'll put it out here and it works great for holding all this, my driving gloves, my knee strap, any lens cleaner, monitor wipes, things like that. My kneeboard, which I'll go ahead and highlight a change to that now, was I bought a pen with a chain on it and attached it. So, because if you're in VR and you drop your pen, you're gonna a lot of hurt. Well, you wouldn't be using your pen in VR, but anyway. So I don't fly in VR. I think I've addressed that before. I only use monitors for flying. But if you drop your pen while you're flying in the middle of a mission, that's game over. Or if you need to write down coordinates and things like that. So yeah, cheap upgrade item. And again, like I always say, it solves the problem for as little money as possible, but also getting the best quality. So you always have to balance those three things. The next thing I will show you, and you might have seen these from when I started the video over here, maybe not, is, as you know, I've always struggled with cable management, and I've always not tried to do a lot because when you're always changing things or chasing down problems, when you do a lot of cable management, you just end up undoing it and redoing it over and over and over. And I've made no apologies about my bird's nest back here. But I did find something that I think is a happy medium, and that's these sleeves. So they had different colors, so I got red and black. And it kind of groups things together and keeps them at least so it's not as bird nesty. I mean, there's obviously some other cables that everything's not in one, but it keeps everything that plugs into my PC all together into two bundles, along with just a couple of other stray wires. Even down on the floor. It looks kind of like a snake's laying around, so that's kind of weird, but it was a cheap, attempt at some cable management, and it matches my motif, so I'm happy with it, and I'll keep it. It's not a game changer one way or the other. If you don't like it or you don't have that problem, don't worry about it. But I tried it. I like it enough, and so I'm going to keep it. Okay, so the next things, let's see. These are some things that are not flight related. So I went back on my SimMagic pedals, I went back to the stock clutch spring. I still wish they still included the harder spring than this one, because this is a little too soft. But the one I had put in there, although I like the stiffness of it, when I use the clutch the most is in NASCAR races when I'm holding it down to save fuel. And so that it was a little too strong for that. If I'm manually shifting, I've loved it. It felt great, felt like a real car, sports car clutch. And so I liked it there. But when you're holding it down for an entire lap around Daytona or Talladega, every few seconds, giving it a little gas, cranking it, giving it some gas, coasting, and then holding it to coast a long way, it gets old and, bearing on your knees. So I decided to go back to that clutch spring, and I'll just live with that. It's a little soft, but it's better than the alternative, I guess. One other small thing I did was, and this one's going to be kind of hard to show you, but I'll try, is my USB hub here. I had it just zip tied to that post before, and so I always keep a sheet of Kydex around just for little projects and things. So I just cut a little piece of Kydex and double-side taped it to the back of the hub, and then just used an 80-20 bolt to hold it in place. So it's just hanging there, and it works perfectly fine. And it's I don't have zip ties that are in the way of other things all the time. So yeah, it was just a nice little thing I thought of while I was doing some other upgrades. I just thought, hey, I'll just tack that in a permanent place without zip ties. One thing that I had during the last video, but I forgot to go over, was I obviously use TrackIR for flight sim stuff, and every once in a while, and I don't even remember what caused it now, but I know other people have had this because I've seen it posted on the internet as well, is that every once in a while TrackIR will lose connection, not while you're playing, but between games, or maybe if if your sim crashes or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the cause of it was, but the camera up here would just lose. It was like it had been unplugged, and so you literally have to go find the USB cable, unplug it, and plug it back in to fix the problem. So what I did was, and I had this before for something else, and again, it may be kind of hard to see, but I put a USB switch in line. So now it's just a convenience thing, so I don't have to, you know, take off my headset, get up, come around here, find the USB cable, unplug it, plug it back in, get back in, put my headset back on. Just, I can now reach through here, I can flip it off and flip it back on, and it reconnects. So that's that. Again, it solves my problem. It was relatively inexpensive, and it's a decent quality product. It's just a switch. So one other thing, I'll highlight this, not a big deal, but at least it's on the list, is I got a different phone charger adapter, which is a little crooked right now for some reason, but just a phone charger adapter. The other one I had was at a 90-degree, and it just caused the wire to bend some, so I just got a new one of those. One thing, it's not any different as far as looks goes, but my little 7-inch monitor here died. I have no idea when it happened or how it happened, but I went to turn it on this weekend and it wouldn't turn on. So I disconnected it, I took it out, plugged it into my laptop, still nothing. So it had died at some point. I'm wondering if maybe it had gotten wedged and the power button was being continually pressed or something and burned something out internally. So I will be watching for that in the future to make sure that power button is not getting depressed accidentally in that cradle. So that was a cheap replacement. Those things are only like 50 bucks on Amazon. So actually I just got that in right before making this video and got it plugged in and turned on, and it works. One confession I have to make, and this is embarrassing and I hate to even tell the story, but I will. I'm pretty transparent about everything here. I was doing the upgrade that I'm about to tell you about, which involved moving the entire rig and dismantling not dismantling, but moving the entire rig around. And as you can imagine, with me raising the wheel deck, I needed to raise my monitor stands. So as part of that, I was having to do some work with the monitor stands, and I had taken one of the monitors off to make sure it wasn't getting harmed. When I was putting it back on and readjusting it for levelness and height, it fell off the, I have the, as you remember, the monitor adjusters. The weird thing about this is that rod is the only thing holding your monitor in place, and it sits down in that U-shaped cradle. I could literally lift this monitor off right now. It's not bolted to the arm. It's bolted to half of that mechanism, and the other half of the mechanism is connected to the arm, and then that rod just slides in place. And then it has all these adjustment screws for adjusting the tilt and the height and things like that. So I was having to raise it pretty high, and so it was not that deep in the cradle. It was very high in that cradle. And I bumped it, and the entire monitor fell forward, and at the time my keyboard tray was over here, and it fell right onto the keyboard tray and busted the monitor. And yeah, big giant dent in the monitor, green, pixelated. So the monitor I had for about a year was totally destroyed, and yeah, that sucked. So, as you remember from some of my previous videos, or the one last year where I did get the monitors, two of my monitors were the same. The third one was different. Well, not unfortunately, but it was the side monitor, which the side monitors were exactly the same. The center one was slightly different. They were both Asus. They were both the same model numbers. The only difference was the center one was 165 hertz and the two sides were 144 hertz. That's the only difference, because the two side monitors, that model was the closeout version, the 144 hertz, and the new model was the 165 hertz. So nobody had the 144 hertz monitors well, a few people did, but they were jacking the price up for 150, 200 bucks. So that's why I had two different kinds. The one in the center was one kind, the two sides were the different kind. So because that happened, I couldn't buy one of these anymore. So I had to find another one of these. So then I was gonna move the center one to that side, the new replacement one here, and move that one to the middle. So I still had the same scenario with one the same and then two different, but they were now the opposite. So I hope that makes sense. So in the process of moving the other two monitors around, I was putting the right one into the center position, and I was checking the clearance on the motion to make sure it was high enough, and I had moved the entire monitor stand forward and forgotten, and when I hit the button to raise the motion platform system, it lifted that monitor and it fell off forward and hit the spline of the direct drive wheel and broke that one. Both of these monitors were destroyed within like 3 hours of each other. I wanted to scream. It was about 11 o'clock at night. My wife had already gone to bed. If it had been in the middle of the day, I probably would have screamed and punched myself in the face. So now the good news is I have all three monitors exactly the same, because I had to buy two new monitors, which matched the one that was in the middle, because that was the newer model. So because of that, all three are exactly the same. As you can imagine, before I don't think I mentioned this in the video previously, but I had to adjust the colors of the center monitor to try to match the two sides, because they were slightly different, just being slightly different models. And honestly, that's still the case. The right monitors, I had to adjust the colors just slightly different from the center one, because they have a different firmware, because it's been a year since I bought that one. So they're up to version like 15 of the firmware. This was like version 3 or 4 or something. So the coloring must have been changed a little bit. So anyway, I still had to adjust things, but because they're all exactly the same, previously the bezel on the bottom was different on the two side monitors. You can go back and look if you want to see that I'm correct on that. But so what I did was, and somebody had posted this on my video and said they had the same monitors and they did this. The bezel at the bottom is thicker than the sides or the top. It also, the corners stick out a little bit, and so I couldn't get the monitors very flush. So I always had the side monitors like offset behind the middle one a little bit, so there was no gap. And he said what he did was sand it off the corners, just with either sandpaper or a rasp or a file or something. And so since I had two broken monitors laying around, that I said, okay, let me test that to see if I could file that off and it not destroy the bezels or come apart or anything. So I played around with them, figured out I could do it fairly easy. So I did that to my center oldest, the monitor that I still have that's a year old. So I shaved off the corners of that monitor a little bit. I'll see if you can see a little. You can see, maybe if it'll focus, how that edge is a little different than you would think stock-wise. I did a pretty good job, so you might not be able to tell, but it has been shaved. And as you can see, it lines up almost perfectly. Okay, I'll put it level. You can see how it lines up very well, even there at the top. It lines up perfectly. There's a slight gap, and that's because my camera's further out here. If my head is in the center, I'll go back to here. If you look left and right from where my eyes would be, there's no gap. So this is the best monitor alignment I have ever had on any of my triple monitor setups. So that, I guess, is a positive, which I'm always trying to be. I'm a half glass full realist, usually I say. I recognize that the glass is half full. I'm not depressed that it's half empty, and I'm not optimistic that it's half full. I'm usually pretty even keel about realistic things. So, but that is a positive that I can bring out of this, although it was a $700 accidental night. So that part sucks. There's just no two ways around it. That sucked. So, but anyway, things happen. It wasn't anything I could learn a lesson from. It were just accidents. And honestly, it's the only time I've ever really destroyed something as part of my rig, ever. So, having been doing this for like 10 years now, I think that's pretty good. I've never accidentally broken anything of mine. I've never dropped a PC. I've never destroyed anything except when I tried to delid my CPU. I think I mentioned that in one of my previous videos. So there's only been two things. They're high dollar mistakes when I make them, but at least they're few and far between. So moving on to the last So all of that has been either due to Microsoft Flight Simulator or just other things that precipitated from those changes, or things that died or broke, things like that. So the other driving change that I wanted to make is I watched a video by Carl Gosling, and I love his stuff because it has good reviews of stuff that most people want, just like a lot of the reviewers do. But I don't know, I just like his approach and how he explains things, and he's kind of like me. He's just kind of does it, just him in the room, and it's not a lot of expensive production quality stuff. And I'm not saying they're not good videos. If you're watching this, Carl, sorry, I'm not insulting your channel. I love your channel, but it's a little more my speed kind of. I don't know. I just like your delivery. I like how he presents things. So anyway, I was watching his video on the slip angle kit, where you get base transducers, like butt kicker type things, but they also came with these vibration isolators. And that intrigued me because, as you hear me say in the beginning of every video, is I live in a downtown condo, which on the 11th floor. And so I have people above me and below me that I'm a conscientious neighbor, and I'm always worried about making noise for my neighbor below. Now, luckily, my neighbor below doesn't live in that condo 90% of the time. It's a second place for them, and they don't live there constantly. So I don't have to worry about it too much, but even when they are here, I don't want them, coming up and telling me I'm being too loud. So, because I have motion, my rig makes some noise. And in that motion system, it has vibration that you can tune in. And I even got rid of my butt kickers because I knew that vibration was built into the system. The problem was the vibration is now directly connected to the pistons that were on the legs, connected, touching the floor, versus the butt kickers. I could position, several joints and seams and structures away from the floor and had them tuned pretty low so that I could feel them, but they didn't vibrate the entire floor. Sorry, excuse me. So I lost some vibrational inputs on when I got motion. So the motion more than made up for it, and I wouldn't have changed my mind even knowing that now. I might not have gotten rid of my butt kickers. I would have kept them, but I wouldn't not get motion. But in this video of Carl's, this whole kit system, and I'll just go ahead and show you now, is there are these feet that have springs inside them that they're made to attach directly to your rig. And you probably still can't see, there are springs inside these little cups. Look at everything below the hockey puck. That's what I'm talking about. These are the vibration isolators. So I got to thinking, it's like, that's exactly what I need so that I could dial in back some vibrational stuff so that I can enjoy that aspect of my SAM rig. And so I even reached out to the company, Slip Angle, and asked if they had anything that was more specific for motion systems. And they actually said no, they would not recommend trying these, and they are looking at maybe developing something for that. But I'm impatient, and I thought, hey, it's gonna work. And so I ordered, and luckily you can order just the isolation kit. Now, it comes with the brackets that you're supposed to mount the base transducers to, which I don't have and don't need, so I've got 4 brackets that I'm not using. But it comes with the 4 isolators. So, as you can see, what I did was I mounted the isolators to a steel plate, and I bought these just from a onlinemetals.com or something like that. These steel plates, then these are 1/4-inch steel plates, so they're not moving, they're not going anywhere. And I bolted the isolators after I drilled the holes myself. And so the only problem is the surface, the top of the isolator is oval or oblong. And obviously the cups that hold the motion rig are round. And so there is a little overhang on each side and I still kept the hockey pucks in place just to help dampen a little bit even more. And because there's a big bolt on top of this that connects that goes down into the screw. Like if you watch his video, you'll see the structure of them. So what I had to do is I had to drill a hole in the hockey puck to make room for that bolt head. So I couldn't put the silver cups directly on top of this anyway. So that worked out good that I had the hockey puck. So I drilled the hole in the hockey puck to make room for the bolt head that's connected to this, and then this sits on top. And the bolts direct to that tightly. It's not like it moves up and down in the hockey puck, so it's not ever going to hit this silver cup here. So anyway, the same thing up front. You can look down in there and see there's one on each side down there as well. So that's what I did, and there's a whole steel plate up there as well. So I did the same thing, just mounted them in place. So if you're already thinking ahead, that raised my entire rig about 3.5 inches, 3 3/4 inches. So that created other problems, mainly my monitor height, which started the whole thing about me raising my monitors, which caused the 2 monitors to break. So what I did, and so my goal was I need to raise my entire monitor stand 3.5 inches. And I don't know if you've seen or remember from the past when I did get this, it's already maxed out. Like this is the cross member, it's already as tall as it can go on these arms. So I either have to buy longer arms of this, or what I chose to do is buy thicker leg arms. So the base leg that comes with this monitor stand was only 40 millimeters. So I bought the 120 millimeters, which is 80 millimeters, which is what? 2.54, 25, 50, 75. So a little, almost 3.5 inches, a little less, between 3 1/4 and 3.5 inches. So that's exactly what I did. And the rest of the height I was able to adjust by raising the adjuster screws on each of the monitor bracket system, which was why these were up high and the one fell off. So I did have to raise my 4th monitor up a little bit just to make room for the change in that height. And then I had to obviously replace the base legs. So that involved, moving my PC box, taking it off that shelf because I didn't have to lay it all down. I was able to hold up one side. I even made with some spare bracket parts, 80/20 parts, I made like a jack system where I bolted a longer arm to this arm to hold it off the ground while I took that one off and put the other one on. And it's just 2 corner brackets. So it was quick and easy. Just had to do that to both sides, and that went flawlessly. No problems. That was easy. That went easier than I expected, actually, once the parts came in and I replaced it. But then that started the whole trial and error of, testing the clearance of the motion under the monitor, adjusting the height, that kind of thing, getting the height of the monitors where I wanted. So that's what then precipitated the accidents with the monitors. So, but anyway, I'm happy to say it all works. The only issue I've had is, and you probably can't even tell, the holes that I drilled in the steel plates, I'm probably off 1 millimeter, and so they're a little closer to the edge of the inside edges than I would like them to be. But for now, I'm not worried about that. It hasn't fallen off, and I've been using it. If I feel it does become more of a safety concern, I will take them out, and make a little bit bigger hole so it could move over a little bit, to move out a little bit to be more centered. One thing I've thought about doing too is getting like some band screws, like a hose pipe bands, and putting around the entire thing at this bottom. So because this gap is big enough that if something were to happen and it were to vibrate or motion and fall out, this whole top half is not attached to anything. That spring sits down in there. And so this gap is big enough for the spring to fall through. So there's really nothing holding in place left and right. Now forward and back, there are these rubber cushions high density rubber on the front and the back inside the cups to keep, so it's not metal on metal rattling, and it keeps them in place that way. So if I had to do over again, I probably would have mounted them 90 degrees this way because I have the pistons closer this way than I do closer from front to back. I get a lot more motion left to right than I do forward and back. So if I'd have mounted them turned 90 degrees, that would have protected any left-right movement, which is a lot more violent in my system than forward and back movement. So, and again, if I feel like there's any safety concerns, I may reconfigure and drill 8 more holes, which turns out to be 24 more holes, because you have to do it. You have to drill 3 holes. You have to drill a small hole, then a medium hole, then a big hole. You can't drill straight a big hole in a 1/4-inch cold roll steel. So that's a whole nother story. That took a long time and caused me to have to realize that my cordless drill was on its last leg, and ended up getting a new Ryobi cordless drill, which that thing is awesome. I love that thing. Should have bought it a long time ago when I was having problems with my cordless drill in the past, but this project made it where I needed to get a new drill too. So, but that's not rig related. So, oh, the other problem that because of the 3.5 inches higher that it was now is my whole castor system wouldn't work, because the castors were made to be very close to the ground, so that when I raise the rig and then lower the wheels no longer would reach the ground when I lowered the rig again. So what I did was I had to buy 3 new arms, these things that the caster is attached to, and I went ahead and took the opportunity to buy them very long so that I could put 4 corner bolts in each on the arms back here. Because if you remember, my last video is I only had 2 at each corner, or the 2 corners up front and the one back here. I only had 2 corner bolts on them, and that's where I had the failures. But that was because I wasn't using washers, but I just wanted the extra security. So that was another item that I ended up buying, with some more corner brackets and longer arms, and had to redo all of the caster arms. And I went ahead and took the opportunity from the last video. I don't know if you remember, I had one where it went out this way, and on the other side it went this way because of my previous configuration with the PC table and all that. So I went ahead and took the opportunity. So now they're both configured exactly the same place, and all the arms are the same height. So all of that's working now. So that's basically, it's not a new concept. It was just making longer legs so that it would work with the higher height of the system. So because of that, my seat is 3.5 inches higher, so it makes it a little different getting in and out of. Not harder, just actually probably a little easier, because I don't have to squat or bend down as much. So it's higher, so it's easier to get in and out of. And I went ahead and configured. This is just a minor thing, but I use these bungee cords and zip ties in a way to hold, because sometimes vibration, the wheels would actually start to fall down. And then if you're doing motion, you don't want those wheels hitting the ground while you're doing motion. So the little bungee cords keep the wheels up in the landing gear raised position, so to say. Oh, and the last thing, because of the raised height again, is my rudder pedals. Now we're going to be 3.5 inches lower, because they're just sitting on the ground. They're not attached to the rig base at all. I had to come up with a new custom system for holding up the rudder pedals. So what I did is I took the 3 legs that I had holding up my caster, and I just rotated them all sideways, because the width of that was, like I said, about 3 inches. And I put a different top MFD board on top. So anyway, it's got, let's see, it's not pretty. The base part is, but then I like it to be angled forward a little bit. So I've got some of the cork vibration isolator pads that I had before. Cut those to kind of raise it up in the back a little bit, to give it a little bit of an angle, so that it just ergonomically fits me. And again, the motion system, when it's all the way down, I still have room for my feet on the pedals without them getting crushed by the pedal plate. So I've obviously tested that out as well, to make sure that was not an issue. So like I said, sorry for the long video. This is going to be, a little over 40 minutes, but that was a large list of upgrades. As always, I will have everything listed in the spreadsheet that is linked below. You can see every single part that's on this entire rig, minus little stuff like zip ties and gaff tape and two-sided 3M tape and things like that. Little stuff, nuts and bolts, hardware that you need for mounting stuff sometimes. If it didn't come with it, or if I did a custom solution to something, I don't include every little nut and bolt, but I do have the miscellaneous line item, which is up to about 500 bucks now over the years of just miscellaneous things. So I guess that's it for now. If you have any questions, feel free to make comments below. I always answer every single person that asks me anything or provides a comment. I will get back to you, and that's easy for me to do because I don't get a ton. So maybe one day I won't be able to make that promise, but for now I still can. And again, I'm not in this for clicks or views, things like that. I just like helping the community with either ideas or solving problems that were problems for me and how I fix them. And I know a lot of guys like to do racing and flight sim. And so there's not a lot of content out there for people who do both and how to make their systems work to do both. And so I know this is really helpful to a few people. But I hope everybody enjoys it and likes to see, what can be done. I love 80/20. I wish I had bought 80/20 the first rig I bought, because it is so adaptable and customizable to anything you want to do. I would never choose anything except an 80/20 rig. I couldn't afford it back then, so I made the progression that most people do, and this is my third rig now, if you count my Wheel Stand Pro as my first one. Actually, it's my fourth one if you count my homemade Wheel Stand Pro that I made years and years ago, that I don't even have a picture of. I wish I did. It was made of PVC and plywood. It was awesome. But anyway, that's it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and yeah, appreciate it. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll get back to you. Thanks again.